All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're diving into something absolutely fascinating: the psychology of people with extremely high IQs. Most of the time when we think about high intelligence, we just picture someone being, well, smarter, or maybe just thinking a bit faster than everyone else. But decades of cognitive psychology research reveals something so much deeper. Having an extremely high IQ doesn't just mean you have a faster mental processor. It literally, fundamentally changes the entire way you experience the world around you. So let's kick things off by busting a massive misconception. The cultural expectation, the Hollywood trope of a genius, is usually this incredibly confident, obvious problem solver who is just loudly dominating the room. But the scientific reality, it's honestly kind of the exact opposite. Highly intelligent individuals often exhibit behavioral patterns that look completely different from the outside. They actually tend to be solitary, intensely observant, and, believe it or not, frequently grapple with profound self-doubt. Here's the roadmap for our explainer today. We just touched on the high IQ myth. Next, we'll unpack the restless internal engine of the highly intelligent brain, then look at the social disconnect it creates. After that, we'll dive into the intellectual paradoxes they face, and finally, what it truly means to live in a high-resolution world. Section 1. A restless internal engine. To really get this, we've got to look under the hood at the neuroscience. People with very high IQs frequently report that their thinking simply never stops. Not when they're resting, definitely not late at night. Psychologist Kazimir Dabrowski identified this as psychomotor overexcitability. It's essentially this restless internal energy that expresses itself mentally. And neuroscientist Rex Jung found that higher intelligence is actually associated with richer connectivity between distant regions of the brain. So this restless background noise, it isn't a malfunction. Your brain is just making simultaneous connections across a massive neural network because, well, that's exactly what it was built to do. And this hyperconnectivity isn't just about cold, hard logic. That's another myth we need to bust. Contrary to the stereotype of the detached, robotic thinker, high IQ individuals actually tend to feel things with way greater intensity. Dabrowski called this emotional overexcitability. It's a heightened responsiveness that makes them acutely sensitive to beauty, music, injustice, and the suffering of others. Research consistently shows that a higher measured IQ strongly correlates with a much greater emotional depth. Now, because of all this intense processing, the high IQ brain has some pretty unique fuel requirements. Neuroscientific research links higher cognitive ability to high baseline dopamine activity in the prefrontal cortex, which is the brain's reward center. Practically speaking, this means highly intelligent people habituate incredibly fast. The mental stimulus that totally satisfied them yesterday just isn't going to cut it today. They have a constant physiological need for novelty. Think of it like a high-performance sports car just stuck idling in bumper-to-bumper traffic. If they don't have that open road of intellectual challenge, they get bored so fast. Section 2. The social disconnect. So, how does this internal engine affect how they interact with others? Well, highly intelligent people spend a lot of time alone. But for them, solitude is fuel. It's not loneliness. The prefrontal cortex, the area handling complex reasoning, functions best without external distractions. In fact, a really interesting study by the London School of Economics found that high IQ individuals report significantly lower life satisfaction from frequent social interaction compared to the average person. Socializing is literally cognitively expensive for a brain that's constantly analyzing every single layer of a room. They genuinely need that stillness just to recharge. Which brings us to a really pivotal and, honestly, sometimes painful question. Beyond just needing quiet to recharge, why is it so genuinely difficult for highly intelligent people to find peers and to actually feel connected when they do socialize? Psychologist Lita Hollingworth studied gifted adults and coined this perfect term for it: stimulus poverty. It's the incredibly frustrating experience of a mind that simply cannot find enough challenge or depth in its everyday immediate environment. So when highly intelligent people seem aloof or distant, it isn't arrogance, not at all. It is a quiet longing for real conversational depth. They often end up calibrating themselves down just to fit in, meaning a huge chunk of who they actually are never even enters the room. And when they are in social settings, they usually show a strong preference for observing rather than immediately jumping in to speak. They're gathering data. They're listening to what isn't being said, picking up on incredibly subtle social dynamics and emotional cues. Because they are processing so much underlying information, they just need more time before they respond. So, next time you're in a meeting, pay attention. That quiet, observing person taking everything in usually isn't disengaged. Actually, they're probably just analyzing the entire room. Section 3.
the intellectual paradox. This leads us to uncover some really counterintuitive traits. We almost always assume intelligence equals absolute confidence, right? But psychology shows us the exact opposite. Highly intelligent people are incredibly comfortable saying, "I don't know." This is intellectual humility in action. It connects directly to the high end of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Basically, the deeper your understanding of a complex subject is, the more clearly you see just how much remains totally uncertain. So when a high IQ person says, "I don't know," it isn't a lack of confidence, it's precision. And because they value that exact precision, their minds stay wide open. While dogmatism is all about never changing your mind, highly intelligent people exhibit what's called cognitive flexibility. They treat their beliefs as working theories. When new evidence comes along that contradicts what they believe, their brain just updates the model. Changing their mind isn't a threat to their ego. They just experience it as moving closer to accuracy. Honestly, the person holding an opinion with absolute certainty, ignoring all the evidence, is almost never the smartest person in the room. Yet despite all this incredible mental agility, they suffer from this fascinating paradox. The work that never starts is almost always the work that matters the most. Highly intelligent people frequently procrastinate the hardest on their most meaningful projects, while they can just knock out low-stakes tasks with zero effort. So why does this happen? Psychologist Carol Dweck identified the root of this as complexity awareness. Before they even start a project, a high IQ brain comprehends the entire scope of what excellence requires. They can literally already see every single flaw of the finished product might have. So that procrastination, it isn't laziness. It's a genuine fear of the massive gap between their perfect internal vision and their inevitably flawed external output. It's procrastination born from caring way too much, not from a lack of care. And naturally, this intense awareness leads to persistent self-doubt. Psychologist Albert Ellis noted that high IQ individuals hold their own output to these insanely high standards they would never, ever apply to anyone else. They often treat any gap at all between their performance and their ultimate potential as evidence of fundamental inadequacy. But again, this doubt isn't a sign of lesser intelligence. Because they understand complexity so incredibly well, that doubt is actually the most reliable signature of a greater intelligence. Section 4, the high-resolution work. Let's bring all of this together to understand the overarching experience of navigating the world while feeling, well, fundamentally out of sync. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who's famous for his work on exceptional minds, found that highly intelligent individuals universally describe having incredibly complex inner lives. They carry this subtle, persistent sense of just not quite fitting in. And this isn't a personality disorder. It's the completely predictable result of experiencing life at a much higher level of detail and resolution than the environment consistently offers. It's like living life in 4K while the rest of the world is broadcasting in standard definition. So, the absolutely crucial takeaway here is how drastically the outside world misreads these traits. What looks like someone being antisocial? Yeah, that's actually just a brain desperately needing a cognitive recharge. What looks like anxiety is the reality of constant, restless neural connectivity. What appears as uncertainty is actually deep complexity awareness. And what seems like someone being difficult is simply the experience of a mind operating totally out of sync with its immediate environment. Ultimately, we really need to reframe how we view profound intelligence. Having a very high IQ isn't just about a test score or thinking fast. It's about experiencing the full, raw complexity of the world with almost a zero filter between you and it. And that right there is exactly what makes a high-resolution mind both the most powerful and undeniably the most demanding thing a person can carry. I want to leave you with a provocative thought to consider today. If the traits we explored in this explainer just gave language to a reality you've been carrying quietly your entire life, how will understanding your high-resolution mind change your path forward? When you finally realize there is absolutely nothing wrong with you, that your mind simply processes more, connects more, and goes further, how does that change the way you live? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I will see you next time.